Last year, around March, we began receiving mail addressed to the professor and Phil, including bills, bank statements, and the like. I thought this was unusual, but my wife wanted to throw it all away. I began labeling the letters "Return to Sender" and "No Such Occupant," and returned them to the mailbox. This situation worsened in October. I was tidying up the yard when a brilliant white SUV arrived with a U-Haul trailer attached. My wife looked up and turned pale. "Oh God, it's them," she exclaimed. A plump woman and a slender man, who only distantly resembled her uncle, emerged. The professor instantly approached my wife. "Professor. Well, let me take a look at you. It has been years." The wife. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "Your instructor. The university is doing virtual classes, and with COVID, we figured we could self-isolate at our ranch." She placed an unusual emphasis on the word "our." "You. Excuse me, but this isn't your ranch." "Professor. I'm confident we can resolve the ownership issue. Aren't you going to invite us in?" "Me? Ma'am, you might be my wife's mother, but you're a stranger to me. I would rather not." The professor turned to Phil. "Professor. Make the call." Phil immediately called the cops and began constructing a story about us refusing to let them into the house that they co-owned. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was insanely twisted. Fortunately, as I indicated earlier, it is a small town. The sheriff approached, and it was someone I had known for most of my life. The sheriff exemplifies the ethos of a small-town constable. He strives to be a peacemaker and peacekeeper first and foremost. He was also aware that the land had been in my family for 3 generations. "Sheriff, please explain. What's this I hear about you selling half your ranch, Duke?" "Me? I did not. These are my wife's parents, and they believe they have a legal claim to my land." "Professor. Not think? We have lived here since February. With tenant laws that means—" "Sheriff, you know. Funny, I don't remember you in town." That quieted the professor for a moment, but then she delved into her purse and drew out a stack of mail, mostly bills and bank statements with our ranch's address on them. "Professor. Then how do you explain these?" The sheriff took the letters and examined them. "Sheriff, you're welcome. Ma'am, these are all marked "Return to Sender." The professor became desperate. "Professor. Please, I have not seen my daughter in years. I just want to make sure she is okay. Surely, you can see that he," she pointed at me, "controls her every move." The sheriff rolled his eyes and approached to speak with my wife and me again. He enjoys resolving interpersonal conflicts, but he had never experienced such craziness. "Sheriff. You might want to invite them in for coffee and chat for a few minutes. They're your parents." "My spouse? If you leave them here, you'll just have to come back in 5 minutes to handle an assault." "Sheriff. You can't mean that. They are your family." "Look, I'm just heading up the road. Invite them in and talk to them." Wife's eyes flashed with rage. Your wife asked, "Does this mean you're going to invite your cousin Aaron to Thanksgiving?" Aaron, the sheriff's cousin, was now serving an 8-year sentence for a variety of felonies. The sheriff's entire family regarded him a source of disgrace. The sheriff's expression changed after he made that statement. He gave my wife a look like, "That bad, huh?" And she simply nodded. The sheriff turned back to face the professor and Phil. "Sheriff. Okay, they don't want you here. It's best if you don't come back." The two protested briefly before piling back into the SUV and driving away, with the sheriff following behind to verify they were completely off the property. This was my first meeting with the professor and Phil, and it left a lasting impression. Previously, I described how my wife's mother, the professor, made an unusual attempt to grab control of our property back in October. Things became crazier in December. Keep in mind that we reside in a little village approximately an hour from a major city, so we're not completely isolated. Our ranch is approximately 15 minutes from town via Farm Road. To give you the lay of the land, I stopped in town to grab some supplies, and by the time I finished packing up the truck, the professor tapped me on the shoulder. This time, she truly acted friendly. I decided to be curt. She literally begged me to listen to her for 5 minutes at the neighborhood cafe. I didn't want to set up a scene on Main Street, so I agreed. We sat down, and the lecturer began speaking. She claimed that my wife was always unsure of who she was, and that the professor and Phil only had her best interests in mind. I didn't want to rant or make charges. I was just waiting for the talk to end. Then she explained, "Your wife saw you coming and wedged herself into my life." I pushed back. I stated that I felt blessed to have her in my life. "Professor. What do you mean blessed?" "Me. Pardon?" "Professor. You just said blessed." I put my head in my hands and wished it was over. Everyone in the cafe stared at the two of us. With her final sentence, The lecturer projected her voice. My response was, "Ma'am, if you're trying to win me over, I suggest you stop using vinegar." She huffed at the phrase but then became friendly again. She reached into her purse and took out a flash drive, laying it on the table between us. "Professor. Okay, that's all the proof you need. Take a peek, and I guarantee you'll discover the truth." I was dying within, not just from shame, but also from the manner my mother-in-law behaved in front of individuals with whom I do business on a regular basis. They would certainly want to know what had transpired. Like I stated, it's a little town. I took the flash drive and fled. I returned to the property, where my wife was waiting. She could tell something had happened in town by the pissed-off expression on my face. I recounted what had happened while holding up the flash drive. My wife was baffled by it. I wasn't about to plug it into a computer we use on a regular basis, so I hunted through a closet for an old Dell laptop that hadn't been turned on in ages. We charged it, turned it on, and blocked the Wi-Fi, my wife's suggestion. We plugged the flash drive in and discovered heaps of PDFs. I'm still not sure how to convey what was within. It looked like a journal, a college article, or a thesis research, with my wife as the topic. I'm not sure what the aim was, or what the professor was testing on her own flesh and blood. It described her first experiences with toy dump trucks as a child, as well as dressed in overalls during their brief stay with her uncle, all of which were chilly, disconnected and, as my wife described it, clinical. My wife was referred to as the subject throughout. It was odd, and I'm still unsure what the point was. My wife was outraged by the PDFs and urged us to burn the drive, which we did in the fire pit. That was the last time we heard from the professor, but my wife believes more will come. First and foremost, I want to mention that my wife is doing well. She's amused rather than terrified or furious, yet I can tell when she feels the need to be protected. We placed a new camera directed straight at the gate, which I'm keeping locked. I noted in the comments that we had a FaceTime contact with my wife's uncle last night to see if we could gain any additional information. Her uncle initially provided brief responses, such as, "Yeah, sounds like her," and "sounds about right." He is a don't speak ill of others type of chap. When I told him about the strange play for the ranch, he eventually revealed additional facts. Whoever predicted she'd do this before with his sheep farm gets a gold star. He stated that the professor was a major reason why he and Phil no longer speak. My wife's uncle's sheep farm was part of a much larger property owned by her grandfather. The grandfather had 3 children, 2 sons and 1 daughter. The daughter relocated to the East Coast and worked in a high-paying executive position. She is nearing retirement and was the oldest of the siblings. When the grandfather passed away, he divided his property into 3 portions. His daughter gave her half to the uncle for nearly nothing because she did not desire rural property and understood her uncle wanted to keep the farm running. The other son, Phil, retained ownership but granted uncle permission to use it. That was until Phil decided to attend an expensive university and sold his portion of the land to uncle for a good price. Uncle was able to maintain all of grandfather's land intact. Phil dated the professor during his undergraduate years and eventually married her. Uncle only heard bits and pieces because Phil only called around Thanksgiving and birthdays. That was it for many years. A few years later, the professor was in what uncle described as a hipster phase when he learned about the farm. She didn't just show up, Phil asked first. Phil understood rural life, but the professor did not. Uncle portrayed the professor's ideal farm life as waking up to a kale smoothie, digging beets for lunch, and spending the rest of the day in the sun. If you live on a farm or ranch, you know there are plenty of everyday duties. Uncle's farm was largely a sheep farm, but they also had a vegetable garden and a small orchard, which provided enough of work. Uncle went easy on the professor, assigning her only a few tasks such as pruning dead vines in the garden and airing the compost. She took it as an agony. She nearly devastated Uncle's tomato crop that year, forcing him to redo the compost every evening. But the way she grumbled, you'd think she was looking after the entire orchard and all the sheep. She disliked manual labor but was strangely drawn to the concept of a farm. In my experience, joy cannot exist without pain. My wife, on the other hand, took to it right away. She enjoyed checking fences, maintaining the flock, distributing feed and working in the vegetable garden. Uncle mentioned that they had a local butcher who came by on occasion to take a couple lambs, depending on price and demand. The butcher paid the professor a visit once when he was on the farm. The butcher was a black man, which Uncle didn't bother or care about, but the professor made a big deal of welcoming him by shaking his hand and spoke in a sing-song, high-pitched tone. Uncle thought this was weird, so he mentioned it to us. The professor desired the farm but did not want to work it. She wanted to own it on paper and have Uncle and her husband manage it. She even persuaded her husband to fight the sale he had made with Uncle a few years before, In order to gain partial ownership.